Welcome back to another episode of the Savior's Tools podcast. I'm Brent Black.
And I am Chad Olson.
And yet again, we're super excited to be with you today. A little announcement at the beginning of this episode. We want to appropriately model summer self-care, summer good mental health tips. That's a lot of today's episode. And in that vein, we actually are going to be taking off June and July from our podcast episodes. But please pick back up in August with us. But just a fair warning on that one.
Yeah, you have to practice what you preach.
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
We're going to practice.
It's self-care, right? Chad, it's just, that's what it is. It's self-care / not having enough time to do everything that we want to do. Life. And Chad, guess what? It's officially here. Summer is here, and today's episode is all about the mental health, having the best mental health possible over the summer. What are some warnings we can and so just some great tips. Yeah. And Chad, I love the scripture in Ecclesiastes. To everything there is a season and a time, to every purpose under the heaven, a time to plant, a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance. And Chad, summer is often so fun, like the best time, the best season. People love their summers. It's a time of fun, rest, vacation, travel, family, reunions, weddings. But not all those things are like for everybody super emotionally easy. And so that's what we want to unpack today, is just how to have the best mental health summer possible.
Yeah, I love it. And in some ways, you might say, well, don't your typical self-care practices apply to summer? And they do. We did a whole episode on a selfie model about self-care practices, and those, of course, do still apply. But there still seem to be some unique things during summer, then those are the things that we want to be able to address today. So it was interesting. I was looking at, this was a dated article, but there was a research study that was done back in 1967, before we were born. But there was two psychiatrists that were trying to evaluate the events that happen in an individual's life that they would deem the most stressful. And some of them are obviously very predictable in terms of death of a spouse or a loved one, some sort of a tragedy, job loss, or even a new job. But it was interesting, in this list of the top 43 most stressful life events, one of them is the end of school. And so teaching here at the Institute, we just wrapped up spring semester. Most students are kind of away from the summer. Some might continue to do some schooling, but lots of them are away from St. George, or they're taking a break from school. They'll pick back up again in the fall. And so just the inherent ending of a school year can cause some stress in an individual's life. And so they go on to talk about why. Like, what is it about school ending that can be stressful? And there are several factors. One is a change in routine and a lack of structure, which kind of go hand in hand. Also, oftentimes there's a reduction in socialization. School oftentimes inherently provides opportunities for social connection, and when that's not there, then we can have a reduction. So in addition to that, though, in summer, you may have an increased likelihood of comparison, which can be stressful and be a negative impact to our mental health, as well as just some unrealistic expectations. So what we want to do during this episode is to be able to take those things and say, what does the gospel of Jesus Christ teach us that could help us with changes in routines, lack of structure, reduction in socialization, comparisons, and unrealistic expectations, which all may be heightened during summer. And we just want to make sure that we're having some really good self-care practices to have a really fantastic summer.
Awesome. Because you might think, and every student or young adult out there listening thinking, wait, the end of school being one of the top stressor events that these researchers found. Are you kidding me? Yeah. Like it really can be. And Chad, I don't know if you've noticed this as well, but it's different than our generation. Chad, we're not as young as we used to be. But I feel like back in the day when you went to college as a young adult or whatever, like you just get it done. You go summer, winter, fall, spring, whatever semester, and you just kind of grit it out and get it done. More and more young adults have, and I think it's a double-edged sword, but I think it's very beautiful. Young adults are like, I'm taking my summer off. I'm taking a gap year. I'm taking a break from things, and so that can be a very good thing. But caution to that, just because you're taking a summer off or taking a gap year, like beware. I mean, are you just taking a gap year to take a year off and just rest? Do you need a year to rest? Or what are you going to do during that year or the summer so that you don't like go down in your outcomes, so that you're still diligent, so that you're still high achieving and can complete what you need to complete? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
But I see the
sure.
young adults shifting.
Yeah.
It's different than when we were young adults.
So, and I think the key is intentionality, and this will apply to many of the things that we discussed today. Is, are we going into this summer or this gap year, or whatever it is, with a purpose? And if there's a specific focus of saying, at the back end of this time, whatever it is, I want this desired outcome.
Yeah.
And so I would just invite us to consider the intentionality of the choices we make, especially going into this summer season.
Yeah. And I think one of the intentions, I don't know why I'm like fixated on this right now, but like, is because the young adults want a break. They're just burned out. They want a break.
Sure.
So can you intentionally take a break and make it a really good, what does a restful break actually look like? Does that mean watching Netflix and eating Cheetos for 90 days? Because if that was going to recharge you to a point, but that's not going to produce the best outcomes. So what does this look like? So we're going to walk through those 4 bullet points that you just brought up there from that great research. And the first one is that summers can be difficult because routine is thrown off and it introduces a lack of structure. Right. And so in each of these 4 bullet points, we're just kind of do what we typically do on this podcast, is go through a little bit of the doctrine and then just hopefully some helpful psychological tools. And so again, these scriptures aren't meant to, twist any guilt or anything like that a little bit, but just to keep us diligent. Mosiah 4:27 says, "It is not requisite that a man should run faster than he has strength, but it is expedient that he should be diligent." So regardless of, let's say you take the summer off, like, can you still be, what would it look like to be diligent while not going to school, while not going, whatever it is that you're taking a break from? How do you still be diligent? Is such a really good word. You don't have to run too fast, right, but just be diligent. D&C 88, cease to be idle, cease to be unclean, cease to find fault one with another, cease to sleep longer than is needful. Now that's the kind of the knife in the side twist in that one. That's a hard one, because summers really are the time where I can sleep as long as I want to. You know what I mean? And that's going to throw off your structure, your routine, and probably not. Is it good for your mental health to stay up till 3 a.m. and then sleep in till, like noon? No, that is not good for your mental health. Does that make sense? Because, it's doctrinal, it's scriptural. And so just to be diligent about that. Alabama 37:6-7 that says, "By small and simple things are great things brought to pass." And so, Chad, one of the things that's difficult, and I fall trapped to this too, but typically during the summers, my scripture study gets thrown off a little bit. My temple attendance gets kind of thrown off, or just because the school year is so structured with a lot of routine, it's kind of easy to put that in there in the structure. And so in summers, you really have to be a lot more intentional to say, okay, I'm going to try to wake up, I'm going to try to exercise in my typical schedule. I'm going to try to, how cool would it be at the beginning of a summer to sit down and say, I'm going to make some goals of things I want to try to accomplish, and you sprinkle in a few temple visits or however you want to do that. So you're putting the structure in there to maintain the routine and the habits that you typically have.
I love that. Just real quick, it reminds me of a talk that was given in General Conference several years ago by Elder Dunn called 1% Better. It was based on the book from James Clear, Atomic Habits, and this idea of we can experience significant progress, but by just doing small and simple things over the course of time. So I love that idea of just in summer to not lose some of the progress that we've already made, but to be able to build off of it. But again, we'll get to this, but not overwhelmingly, just little things that can be done that are going to stack up.
Yep, exactly. And so so a little bit on the psychology side on this, Chad. Psychology strongly shows that routine reduces anxiety and stress. Routine allows your body to know what to depend on. When you wake up and your body is just in the typical fashion of doing things in a certain way, it makes your brain feel safe and that you have something to rely on. And so it tends to decrease anxiety, especially if someone struggles with something like ADHD, then that especially is helpful to say, I have a very strict routine. That's best for my mental health outcomes. And again, summers can make this all go awry. And one of the cool things about routine is that it acts like a scaffolding, so it holds up when your energy dips. Like, okay, I don't feel like getting out of bed. Well, no, I have this routine. I have to show up to my job. I have to show up to this event, to this volunteer opportunity, whatever it is, because I've worked that in. So my energy levels might be all over the place, but it's like this scaffolding that just kind of keeps us going each day. And so again, I think a practical way to do this, Chad, would be to sit down, with your note app or however you want to do this and say, okay, here's what I know about myself in summers, and just be honest with yourself and say, here's what my routine and schedule has looked like in past summers. Am I good with that? Am I good? Yes, I want to break and I want to have some fun, but what can I do to make sure I have routine in my schedule so that I can still accomplish what I want to accomplish and actually like come away from the summer like not only recharged, but maybe even a little bit of a better person because of the last 90 days of doing this summer. I think that could happen.
I love that.
Yep.
Very good. Okay, so let's build off of that. One of the other things that can sometimes make summertime difficult in terms of our mental health is a reduction in socialization. So if those of our young adults who are in school and now they're out of school, they have ripped out from them an inherent structure, social structure, where you have connections with other people, whether that's classes here at the Institute or whether that's classes at the university or college that they're attending, that is no longer. And sometimes I was talking to a young adult, sometimes even the roommate situation is changed where maybe they don't have as many roommates, or one young adult didn't have any roommates in the summer just because people are moving away, right?
Yes.
And so now you have that reduction in potentially housing and in school, and it can erode some of the opportunities for your connections. Now, this is a little bit ironic because in some ways we might think summer would be the opportunity to catch up with friends and go on these trips and make these memories, and in a way it can be, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But also sometimes it can be isolating, where there's a lot of different busy schedules that sometimes are difficult to be able to match up, and you might feel more isolated, withdrawn, or even left out from some of those social experiences.
Yep.
So this is probably a podcast for a completely different day, but at least a little mention of a reminder of the longest longitudinal study on happiness out of the University of Harvard. And they're looking at all of the different predictors of happiness, and the number one greatest predictor is meaningful relationships. So we don't want to push pause on investing in relationships during the summer. We need to continue to be able to nurture those relationships because they are so highly correlated with happiness.
And Chad, one cool thing about that study that I found was that you don't necessarily have to have a relationship with like 1,000 people, like just acquaintances with a ton of people. What that study found was that the happiest people are those that have like a core few people that they're really good friends with. Not like I'm acquaintances with 20 people, but don't really have. And so the summer can be a time to really invest in some of those core relationships.
That's such a great reminder. And we may have a tendency to say, no one's reaching out to me. No one's inviting me. And so there is an element of vulnerability, especially during the summer, for you to do the reaching out. Hey, it's been a little while since we've caught up. What are you doing this weekend? Hey, I'd love to be able to get together and do lunch. You reach out. Again, one of the tendencies that we may have is, I don't want to reach out because they might say no, I might get rejected. Right, that's opportunity cost. But if I never reach out, I forfeit the opportunity for connection. So take the initiative to be vulnerable and reach out to try to have those connections all the time, but particularly during the summer.
Can I make just a selfish plug? I teach the dating and marriage class here at the Institute. Dating could be a wonderful, like summer, you got a little more time on your hands, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Hit up the old mutual app and go out and socialize. Unless you don't want to do the, you don't just a little dating sponsorship. But honestly, it could be fun. Like I think that you can use dating as an avenue as well to make friends if you don't have any. You know what I mean? Like there are ways to connect with other people that way, and go have a good time. You don't have to break your bank account to do it. Go on a hike, get some ice cream, and call it an hour-long date, and that's great. You know what I mean? But you really can, if you have some extra time. Like it takes vulnerability, it takes courage to do that. But little plug for the daters out there. You got this, guys.
That was perfectly
and gals.
Appropriate. Elder Marlon K. Jensen gave a talk on friendship at General Conference, and he quotes Joseph Smith by saying that friendship is one of the grand fundamental principles of Mormonism. He says that thought ought to inspire and motivate all of us because I feel that friendship is a fundamental need of our world. I think in all of us, there's a profound longing for friendship, a deep yearning for the satisfaction and security that close and lasting relationships can give. Does that just pause during the summer? Like, does that need no longer exist? Of course not. It's inherent. It exists. And so then we need to take the opportunity to reach out and invite other people for those social connections. I love Elder Holland's reminder. It says, brothers and sisters, do not take for granted the personal friendships and associations you enjoy in life. Savor them. God expects us to lean on each other and love one another. I just think sometimes there's a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more downtime. What a cool opportunity that would be to also do some reflection of saying, oh, it's been a little while since I've checked up on this friend. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's a friendship that we could have taken for granted that Elder Holland says, please don't take for granted. Savor those friendships, which I think is a good reminder as well.
Chad, I think you can combine the first idea structure and routine with this one to help. So might be a funny metaphor, but my wife has set up play groups for literally every one of my kids that are in school, like all 3 of them right now. And so like on Tuesdays, it's play groups with this kid and all of their friends that are at the same school or whatever. And on Wednesdays, it's the play group with this. And then she reaches out to their moms and says, hey, let's do a play group. And you're the activity. My wife just organizes it all. But like, how funny would it be for a young adult to be able to like metaphorically plan their play group? You know what I mean? To say, I'm going to routine, like, hey, we're like maybe like a gym buddy or a workout, a walking friend. It could be a work friend. It could be we're going to go out to lunch or whatever it might be. But if we don't plan these things, if we don't structure them in, it's just a lot of just wishful thinking to think that we're going to socialize over the summer if we're not structuring it into the summer. I don't think we're strong enough in the moment to be like, maybe it'll happen. We got to structure it.
And there's that intentionality piece, right? And if we're going to talk about these rings of sphere of influences, sometimes summer is the best opportunity to go back to our core familial relationships, siblings, parents, and really strengthen that connection with them. They can be some of our greatest friends. And then to expand it out to ward family and to say, are there individuals within my ward that maybe I haven't learned about as much or spent as much time with or asked on a date, to your point, in the YSA ward.
Let's go.
That could be done. But then you expand it out to one more sphere and then just friends in the community. Now, sometimes we need to think about deepening our friendships or associations, even more generally, through the activities that we select. So, for example, if I'm a little nervous about reaching out to one individual person, I might sign up for a softball league. Mm-hmm. Inherent in signing up for a softball league is I've got teammates. Yeah. I may look at a continuing education course that's offered here at Utah Tech, which they have during the summer, and maybe it's painting or guitar. But guess what? Guess who else is going to be in there? Other opportunities that I can connect with people.
There's volunteer opportunities. The Just Serve app has so many. Like you got to build that structure in.
Right. And so sometimes if it feels a little intimidating to reach out to one specific person, choose an activity that you know that there will be other people. Inherently, there has to be other people in that, and that can be the way to be able to do it. Book groups would be another one, right? An institute class.
I think that institute. Let's go. Selfish plug there, but. One of the ways to do that, Chad. So it's funny you mentioned in summers, often the young adult wards, they trim down a little bit because people, they go away and they trim down. It was the summer when that happened when I really became really good friends with who I would marry one day, Lori Clemens, who is now Lori Black. And so it was that trimming down, but then us participating in a lot of different types of activities together. And honestly, one of those things was trying to magnify a calling. Let's say you're like a part of the family home evening committee or whatever. It's one of those social structures built in. Like if you magnify that calling, or in other words, just try to show up and help plan your built-in social opportunities. It is right there as well.
Good, perfect. So we're just asking us to be able to have a little paradigm shift. It's like, during summer there's more isolation and withdrawal. It doesn't have to be that way.
Nope.
If we look at it intentionally, there could actually be more opportunities or increased chances to deepen friendships and connections with others.
Yep. Okay, Chad. So the third one that can be difficult during the summers is comparisons.
Yeah.
And so typically more free time that we get during the summer associates strongly for most people with more social media time. Mm-hmm. And then when you have more social media time, typically what happens for most people is that you're going to see a lot of people on vacations. They're going to be on these fun adventures. They're going to be socializing. They're going to be these cool family reunions that just look a lot cooler than yours all the time. And this is going to give you ample time to compare. So it's interesting that as far as seasons go, that summer is more of a time of comparison than other seasons. And I love the saying that comparison is the thief of joy, and I think it's really, really true. So as you scan social media during the summer, just a warning is to try to take it all with a grain of salt and realize that you know what I mean. To do the best you can with that. So I found this interesting in kind of preparing for this, Chad. One of the comparison things that happens more during the summer than other months is body image. Because you're seeing more pictures of, it's warmer, more pictures of like bodies, less clothing often. We live down here in St. George, that happens. And what happens often is people comparing more body image issues ramp up in the summers, which I found is fascinating. In fact, one research study found that bulimia and binge eating are more prevalent during the winter, but in the summer months, anorexia is more prevalent because of more exposure to body image issues, appetite suppression from the heat, and heightened physical activity, which I think that's really fascinating if you've worked with, and that'll be another episode for another day, just body image issues that we could tackle that I think would be quite fun. But to realize, during the summers, you go to the water park, all that kind of stuff, to do your best not to try to compare your body to other people's bodies. That's a fun thing during the summers, to go to the lake, go swimming, go to the pool, whatever it might be. But to really, to know, I mean, we'll spend a whole episode on this, but remember that God looks on the heart, not on the outward appearance.
I really like that. There's this project called Beauty Redefined, and these two sisters have this beautiful and powerful message about seeing our bodies as instruments, not ornaments. And I think that is just a really good self-talk and reminder of how grateful we are that God has given us these bodies to be instruments, to be able to do some amazing things, not ornaments to be looked at. Yeah. And I think just, again, especially during the summer, all times, but especially during the summer, remember how cool is this that God has given us these bodies to go be instruments, to be able to go to the lake, to be able to go tubing, right? To be able to go and do a service project. How awesome. And that just might be a little self-talk that can help us with that comparison of bodies.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. One other idea on comparison, Chad, is that as you're seeing all these social media posts, you might see people on all these extravagant vacations. It seems like, where are the people getting all the money for all these Disneyland trips and all the, whatever it might be and all, and again, maybe we'll have another thinking about good episodes here we could do in the future, like an episode on happiness and money. You don't need a lot of money to have a good summer. You don't need any money to have a good summer. You can, with the core people around you, with a good routine and structure, have a restful, wonderful, fun, amazing summer without breaking the bank account, even though it looks like everyone else is doing that. So try not to compare with the money side of things as well.
Great. Love it. So that takes us into one other thing that we want to be careful of going into this summer, which is to make sure that we have realistic expectations. One of the things that can negatively impact our self-confidence or our mental health is to have these unrealistic expectations that we're constantly falling short of. Now, again, generally speaking, that's a really good mental health concept, but particularly in the summer, what does it look like? It may look like thinking, this is the summer that my life is going to change, or I'm going to take this trip or have this experience that's going to change the trajectory of my life. Maybe.
Maybe.
but more likely, it's going to be what we make of it in terms of our intentionality. So again, this is the kind of middle ground. Expectations are good. They provide structure. They provide vision. We're not saying erase all expectations. We're just saying be careful of having unrealistic expectations. So here's a little fun exercise at the beginning of the summer to engage in. We recently have been studying in Doctrine and Covenants section 46 about the gifts of the Spirit. And one of the gifts of the Spirit is the gift of prophecy. And in a way, there's probably lots of applications of the gift of prophecy, but I love one interpretation given by Elder Clark, Emeritus General Authority, who says, the gift of prophecy is to be able to predict the future based on following the teachings of Jesus Christ. It's the ability to see ourselves and the outcomes that are going to occur as we follow the Savior. So in a way, how cool would it be if we're listening to this, 1st of June, end of May, and now picturing ourselves middle of August, and to say, how do I envision myself? What's going to happen over the next couple of months that could really change my life in a way that helps me to make progress? And I think that we can be realistic and modest in those expectations, but it's still enlisting the gift of a prophecy or the mental health or the mindfulness practice of visualization that can be incredibly helpful as well.
That's cool.
So I want to share this little story from President Oaks in a talk that he gives entitled Good, Better, Best that I think honestly kind of blends, Brent, what you were talking about with comparisons, but also helps us to stay realistic in our expectation as we think about summer plans. Here's a story. In choosing how we spend time as a family, we should be careful not to exhaust our available time on things that are merely good and leave little time for that which is better or best. A friend took his young family on a series of summer vacation trips, including visits to memorable historic sites. At the end of the summer, he asked his teenage son which of these good summer activities he enjoyed most. The father learned from the reply, and so did those he told of it. The thing I liked best this summer, the boy replied, was the night you and I laid on the lawn and looked at the stars and talked. Super family activities may be good for children, but they're not always better than one-on-one time with a loving parent. Isn't that cool?
That is really cool.
So again, that idea of let's be realistic with our expectations. Let's not do comparisons. Sometimes it is just those simple things that fuel the connection that is most meaningful in our life.
That reminds me, Chad, of so recently my my daughter, we were spring cleaning her room. Seems like it's like a monthly thing, spring cleaning her room. Anyway, like a lot of trash in there. Anyway, she stumbled on this like old piece of paper in a journal she had torn out that were some of her like life goals, like her like bucket list. And this is like an 11-year-old writing her bucket list, you know? And it was super cute. And one of them, she's like, Dad, what do you think about this? And one of them on her bucket list, like dream goals for her life, was to go to a park with mom and dad, lay down a blanket, look up in the sky and talk. And I was like, oh, like my heart was like full, like, I think we can do that one, Gwen. You know what I mean? I thought it was going to be like, go on this fancy whatever or something. But it was, that's my 11-year-old daughter, now 12, her idea of just this awesome moment. It reminds me of the quote from Elder Uchtdorf that love within the context of families is spelled T-I-M-E, time. And it doesn't have to be this crazy, like expensive trip, just laying down at a park with your daughter or whatever that might mean in your circumstance. Chad, I love one more thing on this one. I love this idea. When I was thinking about my daughter too, I had a friend tell me, you get 18 summers with your kids, and then most likely they're going to leave. Maybe hopefully they'll leave the house and not live in your basement for the rest of their lives. But even 18 summers, I would trim that down because the first few they don't remember anything or whatever. But you don't get that many with your family together like that. So do one or two things that you'll remember. Go to the park, lay down with your child, whatever it might be. Go on that date. Go on that, have that fun experience. Improve yourself and make that summer as good as possible.
Really good. I think that for many of us during the summer, there are sometimes unique opportunities to connect, whether it's in the form of reunions or holidays or something like that. So I was just going back to doing a little study in the scriptures and looked at how God's covenant people were commanded to observe feasts. So they had multiple feasts that they were supposed to gather throughout the course of the year, which obviously brought these families together, but they were considered holidays, and they were considered opportunities to be able to worship and to be able to strengthen their relationships really with God and with other people. And so while we don't necessarily have like Feast of the Tabernacles, Feast of Unleavened Bread, Passover in that way, we do have some things that happen during the course of the summer that do bring us together to be able to celebrate or to be able to have some unique connections. And we may want to just think through those things to be prepared for those gatherings.
Yeah. And one of those gatherings, Chad, the beloved family reunion. Let's go. Don't you love a good family reunion? Mixed bag. I've literally had sessions, Chad, sitting down with people, and the whole session was about, I don't want to go to this family reunion. Multiple times this has happened in session. And so depending on who you are, that might not be the most great thing to look forward to.
Right.
And you got to take the time off and all this kind of stuff to be able to do it. So sometimes I call, it's like the second coming. The name for the second coming is the great and dreadful day of the Lord. I think second comings are great and dreadful.
You should make shirts with
the
that.
Great and dreadful second coming, or family reunion. So I don't know what it might be, kind of a comparison there. So Chad, here's a made up scenario. Okay. And I'm just going to ask you, how would you respond to this as a therapist and as a mentor to a young adult? Let's say a young adult, Heather, is really not amped about going on a family reunion because she's got this aunt Jenny who's just a piece of work and always says these snide comments and like, oh, where you at in life? And you should be progressing more. And, she's just, Aunt Jenny just doesn't get it. She's mean, but she's just that way. And there's a couple other people that she's just really not looking forward to seeing. There's a couple that she is looking forward to seeing, but she thinks about it a lot. And Heather does not want to go on this family reunion. What advice would you give for Heather, for all the Heathers out there who aren't amped about going on a family reunion to have a successful family reunion?
Okay. I think there's a couple really practical skills that are going to have to be blended in order for her to be able to have the best possible experience. The first one comes with a matter of perspective. That is, let's say that there's 50 people that are going to be at the reunion for Heather, and there's an individual specific aunt and maybe a few others that she's just not excited about. But the question is, are there individuals that you are excited to be able to make some connections with? And so in a way, we call it the gap and the gain. Are we living in the gap and the gain? Are we living in, what I'm dreading or what I'm not looking forward to or what I don't have versus what I do have? And so the first thing I'd say is to seek out opportunities to connect with those who you're looking forward to have connections with. Now, there may be some situations within those interactions that you'll have to implement some of the skills that we've talked about on this podcast about boundaries. And to be able to say, what am I okay with? What am I not okay with? And I have to pair that boundary with assertiveness to be able to stick up for myself in certain situations, to be able to make sure that I'm putting myself in social situations that are going to be able to be positive and to be able to lead to positive outcomes. Now, there is going to be some vulnerability. Now we'll pull that skill in to be able to sometimes be the one that reaches out. Sometimes we might go in that reunion and be like, oh, no one approached me. No one asked about anything. It's like, okay, that could be the case. And how many times did we reach out and be like, hey, it's been a little while. Like, how is school going? Where are you at? And let's us take the initiative to be able to reach out to other people to be able to have those connections as well.
Yep.
What would you add?
I think that's awesome, Chad. I think I would add just sort of an ideology, a paradigm shift above, or like, I don't know, in all of that.
Yeah.
Just the idea that you don't like time with. There's a reason why God put us in these families. I don't think he needed like Jenny and Heather, like, because he needed them like together in the same family. Old Aunt Jenny, we all got one of them or two or three. But I like family time is precious. The older I get, Chad, the more I appreciate a reunion because I think it's very limited. Like God put these people in my life for a reason. I love them, even though in all of their colorful weirdness or awkwardness or whatever it is. I mean, I'm weird in different ways too. They could judge me if they want to. But I think if you can go into it with a forgiving, pleasant attitude and just there's sometimes where me and my wife, before we pull into the driveway, when we get there to that experience, it's like, okay, we're going to commit to like, we're going to be positive. We're going to be nice to each other. We're going to, like kind of commit.
That's
you got to like, you kind of almost have to amp yourself up, like a pregame, like you listen to that song, whatever it is to try to amp yourself up to go and have a good experience because, we, at the end of the day, we all have an Aunt Jenny and I think to not go to the reunion because of Aunt Jenny would be sort of a disaster for Heather because she can sit at home and watch Netflix if she wants, or she could go and really try to put herself out there and try to develop those core relationships, the few. She doesn't need one with Aunt Jenny. She can set boundaries with her, but with those few that can make her have very, rewarding relationships.
So here's another thought from the Savior's teachings when he says, he who is the greatest of all is the servant of all. And so I think even in those reunion settings, if your perspective, your paradigm is, who can I bless? Who can I help? Who can I strengthen? Then it's going to actually naturally forge stronger relationships, but it actually can be more meaningful for me as an individual because I am developing an attribute of compassion, empathy, service. So I think just maybe going into the reunion thinking, what Christ-like attribute can I practice or develop through this interaction?
Because on the flip side of that, I've seen a lot of people go into family reunions with the victim lens, like, ooh, I swear she looked at me that way and I knew she was going to do this. And did you see how she said that, the tone in her voice? And she checked up on me again and I knew she was going to do that. And I haven't found anyone to date or get married. And I'm not married, or I'm still not pregnant, but don't you dare, like, I saw the way you looked at me. Like we're almost looking for the negative. Like, don't do that. Yeah. Don't try to find the negative. Don't put that victim lens on, and because you can do that real easily. And maybe you're right, but it's not helpful. It's not going to make you feel good.
That goes back to soundtracks, right? What's the soundtracks in our mind?
Yeah.
So we want to just share just one or two last thoughts because there was this really powerful article in Church Magazine, one of the YA weeklies, called "The 5 Secrets to Summer Satisfaction," and it builds off of some of the things, but there's a few things that are unique enough going into the summer. Again, this podcast has got to last a couple months, so we got to really load it on here. But the first one is to strengthen your strengths. Sometimes we have a tendency to be able to say, oh, where's my weakness and what can I do to change the weakness into strength? Has its place for sure. But I think about the times, particularly when I was in my adolescence and young adulthood, where I wanted to be able to get better at a sport. And it's oftentimes said that the greatest progress is made in the off season. And so to be able to say, I'm already good at fill in the blank. Okay, what can I do, even though it's not necessarily go time or in season, to be able to strengthen my strength instead of just strengthening my weakness? What do you do well, and then go do it better? Again, whether it's art or sports or music. Is there a class you can take during the summer when you have a little bit more flexibility? Is there a private tutor that you can take, or can you just have some more time to be able to say, man, what does it look like for me to be able to strengthen my strength? So that's one way to be able to spend your summer. Okay. Strengthen your strength.
I love it. The next one is similar, but is to compound your interests. And so when you compound something, you let it grow and add it on to each other. And so first, this would look like identifying interest and identifying another interest, and how can you pair those interests together? So let's say, practically speaking, a young adult's interest is, I love doing things outdoor, but I also am interested in making some money this summer. So could you, if you have the liberty to do so, find a job where you can do something outdoors, work at a park or whatever it might be, construction or what, where you're doing something outdoor with your hands. If you like to do that, combine those interests with each other, and you can have those compounded. So I think that's a great idea.
Perfect. I love it. Covey talks about how we spend our time with these 4 quadrants. You might be familiar with this idea of urgent and non-urgent and important and non-important. It seems like we should always try to carve out time for quadrant 2 of things that are important but non-urgent. Summertime seems like it's a really good time to be able to spend in that box. And so one of the things that we want to be able to recommend from this article, number 3, is to find a mentor. So this idea of who are some people that I could reach out to, whether it's a community member or a professor or even a ward member. It could be a grandparent, right? But someone who has a lot to offer in terms of their life experience or their expertise. Ask them to mentor you. Sometimes I think we underutilize that. And again, because sometimes during summer we have a little bit more time, that when we ask if an individual will mentor us in a specific skill acquisition, they more than likely would be willing to be able to do so. There is something about being on the back end after you've had an experience and then you get to mentor the next generation that's so satisfying. So you may want to consider this summer, is there a mentor that you'd like to be able to reach out to and ask for some help in improving in some area of your life?
And I love that, the overt, like asking, will you be my mentor? Will you help me?
Right.
Chad, so I'm a chaplain in the military. I have an assistant in the like if I ever get deployed, I'm a non-combatant. I can't shoot people. I can't carry a gun, but he can. So he's kind of like my bodyguard, but also he does everything like for me, he or she. And in this case, he shout out to Hunter Kelly. He's my chaplain assistant right now, lives in Cedar. And he is this young adult kid who just will be like, hey, chaplain, will you teach me? Or, hey, I've got a question about this, or relationships. Cool. Or he's just like, will you mentor me? What do you think about this? He is like this sponge that just wants to soak up. And it's so rewarding for me to be his mentor. And so if you're listening and thinking like, well, I don't have a mentor, then I know a good guy. His name is Chad Olson, and his number, no, just kidding. But ask somebody to be your mentor. It could be fun. The last one on these ideas is to form a team. And so how I love accountability buddies. You know what I mean? Let's say you want to try to get a little bit more fit this summer, but you know yourself, you're not going to show up. Like, is there anybody that you could, that you're going to meet with in the morning to go running, because you're going to be like 90% more likely to show up at that running event with an accountability buddy there. Do you have a business idea? How cool would it be to find someone who's like-minded, to someone who has talents that you could complement each other and form a team over the summer for young adults. You also kill that one bird with the other bird, which is like the socialization one. And we shouldn't kill birds at all, but you know what I mean? You could kill 2 birds with 1 stone there. Yeah. So form your team.
I love it. The fifth secret is to bless for success. We've already kind of talked about this, looking at opportunities. We use the reunion as an example, but can I use the summer to go bless someone else? It's not just about self-improvement. How can I be better and what can I learn? Brother Black teaches this fantastic class called Self-Care, Self-Worth, Self-Compassion. Did I get that right?
Self-love, self-worth,
Self-love. There we go.
Yeah.
And
a lot of self.
A lot of self. And the irony is that it's actually all about other people.
Yeah.
And I think that can be, hey, let's use our summer to be able to go strengthen, bless other people.
Yep.
So as we do a quick wrap up of the scriptures in terms of what it says about summer, I was fascinated. I don't know where I missed this, but I always associated harvest with the fall. But specifically in the Old Testament, many of the references to harvest are summer. And it makes sense that figs and grapes and so forth are usually harvested during the summer, but that they become symbols of the abundance of God's blessings. And so I thought how fun it is that we have an opportunity this summer to be able to harvest, whether that harvest is in self-improvement or progression or blessing other people. But more important than anything else is whatever we reap, that we be careful not to take too much credit, because we know that it's all a blessing from God. And so we get to have a summer harvest. We'll take the fall in a little bit, but this summer, let's recognize God's hand in our life. He's so good. His blessings are so abundant. And he is, as Elder Kieran teaches, he's in relentless pursuit of us, even during our summer months of our life. And so let's enjoy that harvest that comes during the summer.
Well, Chad, I am amped to just have a great summer. Let's
be great.
go, brother. And just last thing, just a reminder that we'll be back here in August. So we'll be back in August, and in the middle of all that, have a great summer. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.